The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried between spam and quarterly reports. 2 lines. No explanation. Just a cold dismissal that would cost my former employer more than they ever imagined paying me in a lifetime. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Catherine Hayes, and I used to believe that hard work and loyalty meant something in corporate America. I spent 7 years at Meridian Financial Solutions, climbing from junior analyst to senior contract manager, handling multi-million-dollar deals that kept the lights on and the executives in their corner offices. I thought I was indispensable. I was wrong about a lot of things back then. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at the 32nd floor of the Glass Tower downtown at 7:30 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand, ready to tackle another day of negotiations and contract reviews. The Meridian logo gleamed behind the reception desk. All chrome and corporate confidence, while employees shuffled past in their pressed suits and polished shoes. I had 3 major contracts on my desk that morning, each worth millions. The Blackstone development deal alone was worth $3.2 million, a real estate partnership that had taken me 6 months to negotiate. The Henderson Group contract was even bigger at $4.1 million, and the Morrison Industries deal rounded out my portfolio at $800,000. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet to me. They were relationships I'd built, trust I'd earned, and expertise I'd developed over years of late nights and weekend calls. But corporate restructuring has a way of reducing people to line items on a budget sheet. The first sign something was wrong came when I noticed Miranda Collins, our HR director, hovering near my cubicle around 10 a.m. She kept glancing at her phone, then at me, then back at her phone. Miranda was the kind of person who scheduled her bathroom breaks, so seeing her loiter was like watching a cat bark. "Catherine," she finally said, her voice carrying that particular tone that every employee dreads. "Could you come to Conference Room B for a moment?" Conference Room B was where dreams went to die. It was the smallest meeting room on the floor, with no windows and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look like they were already dead. I'd seen enough colleagues disappear into that room over the years to know what was coming. Inside, I found Miranda sitting across from David Chen, the CFO, and my direct supervisor, Robert Manning. Robert wouldn't meet my eyes, which told me everything I needed to know about who had thrown me under the bus. "Catherine," David began, consulting a folder in front of him. "We've been reviewing our operational costs, and we've decided to restructure the contracts department." I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my expression neutral. "What kind of restructuring?" "We're streamlining operations," Miranda chimed in, using the corporate speak she'd probably practiced in the mirror. "Your position is being eliminated effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. 7 years of 60-hour weeks, of missing family dinners and weekend barbecues, of building relationships with clients who trusted me personally, not just the company. 7 years reduced to operational costs and streamlining. "I don't understand," I said, though I was beginning to understand perfectly. "My portfolio is worth over $8 million. I've never missed a deadline, never lost a client. My performance reviews have been outstanding." Robert finally looked up from his hands. "It's not about performance, Catherine. It's about efficiency. We can handle your workload with temporary contractors at a fraction of the cost." A fraction of the cost. That's what 7 years of expertise was worth to them. "We've prepared a generous severance package," David added, sliding an envelope across the table. 2 weeks' salary, and we'll provide a positive reference for your job search." 2 weeks' salary. For 7 years of my life. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of exit procedures and badge surrendering. I cleaned out my desk while my former colleagues pretended not to stare, packing 7 years of my professional life into a cardboard box. The personal photos, the awards, the coffee mug from the company retreat where I'd been named Employee of the Quarter 3 consecutive times. As I walked toward the elevator, carrying my box of discarded memories, I passed the break room and overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. "So, who's taking over Catherine's accounts?" someone was asking. "David hired a temp," came the reply. "Some kid fresh out of college. They're paying her $12 an hour. $12 an hour. To manage $8 million in contracts. I stood there for a moment, letting the full weight of the insult sink in. They weren't just replacing me. They were replacing me with someone who made in a month what I made in a day. Someone who had no experience, no relationships, no understanding of the delicate negotiations that kept those contracts alive. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt something else entirely. Clarity. For the first time in 7 years, I could see Meridian Financial Solutions for what it really was. A company that valued the bottom line over everything else, including the expertise that made that bottom line possible. I spent that evening in my apartment, surrounded by the contents of my desk box, drinking wine and thinking about my next move. The severance package sat unopened on my kitchen counter, a pathetic consolation prize for 7 years of dedication. But as I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, I realized something important. Those contracts weren't just numbers on Meridian's books. They were relationships, personal relationships that I had built, cultivated, and maintained. The clients didn't just trust Meridian Financial Solutions, they trusted me. And I was about to become their competition. The next morning, I called my lawyer. By the end of the week, I had incorporated Hayes Contract Solutions LLC and rented a small office space downtown. It wasn't much, just a single room with a desk and a phone. But it was mine. No corporate restructuring, no efficiency experts, no $12 an hour temps. My first call was to Marcus Blackstone. "Catherine," his voice boomed through the phone. "I heard what happened at Meridian. Absolute travesty. You were the only one there who understood our business." "Thank you, Marcus. Actually, I'm calling because I've started my own firm. I wanted to give you first refusal on our services." There was a pause, and I could hear Marcus thinking. The Blackstone development deal with Meridian wasn't set to renew for another 3 months, but there were always smaller projects, amendments, and new opportunities. "You know what, Catherine? I've been thinking about diversifying our contract management anyway. Why don't you come by tomorrow? I have a new development project that might interest you." The meeting with Marcus went better than I'd hoped. Not only did he want to work with me on the new project, but he also mentioned that he'd been frustrated with the service at Meridian since my departure. The temporary contractor they'd assigned to his account had already made 2 significant errors in the first week, including sending confidential documents to the wrong email address. "The girl seems nice enough," Marcus said, "but she doesn't understand the real estate business. She keeps asking questions that you would have anticipated 3 steps ahead." By the end of our meeting, I had my first contract with Hayes Contract Solutions. It was only $200,000, but it was a start. More importantly, it was a direct competitor to Meridian Services. Word travels fast in our industry. Within 2 weeks, I had calls from Jennifer Henderson and Thomas Morrison, the other 2 major clients from my old portfolio. Both were expressing similar frustrations with Meridian's new service model. "I don't want to be difficult," Jennifer told me over lunch at her favorite downtown restaurant. "But I'm used to working with someone who understands my business. This new person they assigned to my account keeps asking me to explain things that you and I worked out years ago." The Henderson Group contract was up for renewal in 6 weeks. It was worth $4.1 million to Meridian. But Jennifer was clearly having second thoughts. "I've actually been considering putting the contract out for bid," she continued. "Get some competitive quotes. What do you think?" I maintained my professional composure, but inside I was smiling. "I think that's always a smart business practice, Jennifer. Competition keeps everyone sharp." 3 days later, I submitted a proposal to the Henderson Group. My quote was competitive, my terms were better, and most importantly, I was someone Jennifer trusted. The decision was obvious. Meanwhile, back at Meridian, things were falling apart faster than I'd anticipated. The $12 an hour temp, whose name was apparently Ashley, was struggling with the complexity of the contracts she'd inherited. I heard through industry contacts that she'd already mixed up 2 different client requirements, sending Henderson Group documents meant for Morrison Industries, but the real disaster was yet to come. The Blackstone development contract had a renewal clause that required specific notification procedures 60 days before expiration. It was a standard provision, but one that required careful attention to detail and calendar management. I had always handled these notifications personally, setting up elaborate reminder systems to ensure nothing fell through the cracks. Ashley, it seemed, had missed the notification entirely. I learned about it through Marcus himself, who called me in a state of controlled fury. "Catherine, I just got a call from that Manning character at Meridian. Apparently, they missed the renewal notification deadline for our primary contract. Do you know what this means?" I knew exactly what it meant. The contract had a penalty clause for missed notifications, something I'd negotiated years ago to protect Blackstone from service interruptions. If Meridian missed the deadline, the contract would automatically terminate with a penalty payment of 15% of the total contract value. 15% of $3.2 million was $480,000. "I'm meeting with their team tomorrow," Marcus continued. "But honestly, Catherine, I'm done with them. This is exactly the kind of amateur mistake that cost me money and credibility with my investors." The meeting between Marcus and the Meridian team was, by all accounts, a disaster. Robert Manning tried to downplay the mistake, suggesting that Ashley was still learning the ropes and that these things happen. David Chen attempted to negotiate a reduced penalty, but Marcus was having none of it. "Gentlemen," Marcus reportedly said, "this isn't about learning curves. This is about professional competence. Catherine Hayes never missed a deadline in 7 years. Your replacement missed one in 7 weeks." Meridian lost the Blackstone contract that day, along with the penalty payment. More importantly, they lost the opportunity to bid on Blackstone's upcoming $5 million expansion project. Both contracts came to me instead. The domino effect was swift and devastating. When word spread that Blackstone had terminated their relationship with Meridian over a missed deadline, other clients began scrutinizing their own service levels. The Henderson Group moved up their contract review timeline and switched to my firm 2 weeks later. Morrison Industries followed suit within the month. In the span of 6 weeks, I had effectively stripped $8 million worth of contracts from my former employer. But the damage to Meridian went far beyond the immediate financial loss. In our industry, reputation is everything. When a firm loses 3 major clients in rapid succession, especially to a startup run by their former employee, it raises questions about their competence and stability. I started getting calls from potential clients who had heard about Meridian's troubles and wanted to explore alternatives. Meanwhile, Ashley, the $12 an hour temp, was quietly let go. I heard through the grapevine that she'd been made the scapegoat for the whole debacle, which struck me as particularly unfair. She'd been set up to fail from the beginning, given responsibilities that required years of experience and institutional knowledge. Robert Manning, my former supervisor, was forced to resign in the aftermath. The official reason was pursuing other opportunities. But everyone knew he'd been pushed out for his role in the restructuring decision that had backfired so spectacularly. David Chen, the CFO who had orchestrated my termination, found himself in front of the board of directors explaining how a cost-cutting measure had resulted in an $8 million loss. His explanation that they'd tried to streamline operations by replacing experienced employees with temporary contractors didn't go over well with the board members who were now looking at a significant revenue shortfall. The irony wasn't lost on me. In their effort to save money by replacing me with a cheaper alternative, they'd created the exact conditions that allowed me to walk away with their most valuable client relationships. 6 months after my termination, Hayes Contract Solutions had grown from a 1-person operation to a team of 5 professionals. We'd moved to a larger office space and had a client roster that included not just my former accounts, but several new clients who had come to us based on our reputation for personalized service and attention to detail. The contrast with Meridian couldn't have been more stark. While my former employer struggled to rebuild their contract management division and repair their damaged reputation, my company was thriving precisely because we offered what they had abandoned: expertise, experience, and personal relationships. I received a call from Miranda Collins, the HR director, about 8 months after my termination. She wanted to know if I'd be interested in returning to Meridian as a senior consultant to help rebuild their contract management capabilities. We've realized that we may have been too hasty in our restructuring decisions, she said, her voice carrying none of the corporate confidence I remembered. David Chen is no longer with the company, and we're looking for experienced professionals to help us regain our competitive position. I listened politely as she outlined their offer, which included a 40% salary increase over my previous position, equity participation, and a signing bonus. It was a generous package, the kind that might have tempted me a year earlier. I appreciate the offer, Miranda, I said, but I'm quite happy with my current situation. Hayes Contract Solutions is doing very well, and I'm not interested in returning to a corporate environment. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand. But Catherine, if you ever change your mind, the door is always open. The door was open, but I had no intention of walking through it. I'd learned too much about corporate loyalty and the true value of experience to ever go back to being an employee whose worth was measured solely in salary costs. A year after my termination, I ran into Robert Manning at an industry conference. He looked older, grayer, and decidedly less confident than I remembered. His new job was with a much smaller firm, and from what I'd heard, he was making significantly less money than he had at Meridian. Catherine, he said, approaching me cautiously, I heard about your success with Hayes Contract Solutions. Congratulations. Thank you, Robert. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to say more but not sure how to proceed. Finally, he managed, I want you to know that the decision to let you go wasn't mine. It came from the top. I nodded politely, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. He'd been in that conference room, and he'd had the opportunity to speak up for me. He'd chosen not to. I hope there are no hard feelings, he continued. No hard feelings, I replied, and I meant it. My anger had long since been replaced by something more valuable: success. The truth was, getting fired from Meridian had been the best thing that ever happened to my career. It had forced me to recognize my own worth and bet on myself in a way I never would have while comfortable in a corporate job. The security of that position had made me complacent, accepting incremental raises and modest promotions when I should have been building something of my own. 2 years after my termination, Hayes Contract Solutions had become one of the most respected boutique contract management firms in the city. We specialized in complex, high-value deals that required the kind of personal attention and expertise that larger firms couldn't provide economically. I'd also developed a reputation as someone who could handle difficult transitions and contract disputes, skills I'd honed during the dramatic exit from Meridian. Companies facing their own contract management challenges sought out our services specifically because of our track record with complex client relationships. The final twist in this story came 3 years after my termination, when I received a call from a corporate headhunter. A private equity firm was considering acquiring what was left of Meridian Financial Solutions, and they wanted to conduct due diligence on the company's contract management capabilities. We understand you used to work there, the headhunter explained, and we'd like to get your perspective on their operational strengths and weaknesses. I spent an hour on the phone with the private equity team, providing a detailed analysis of Meridian's contract management division. I was professional and objective, focusing on systemic issues rather than personal grievances. But the picture I painted was not encouraging. The company that had once boasted about streamlining operations and cutting costs was now struggling with high employee turnover, client retention problems, and a reputation for service inconsistency. Their contract management division, which had generated $8 million in revenue during my tenure, was now operating at about 40% of its former capacity. What would it take to rebuild their capabilities? The lead partner asked. Significant investment in experienced personnel, at least 2 years to rebuild client relationships, and a complete overhaul of their service model. I replied, frankly, it would be cheaper to build a new division from scratch than to fix what's there. The private equity firm withdrew their acquisition offer the following week. 6 months later, Meridian Financial Solutions was acquired by a competitor in a fire sale that valued the company at roughly 30% of its worth when I'd worked there. The new owners immediately shut down the contract management division and transferred the remaining clients to their own team. As I read about the acquisition in the industry trade publications, I couldn't help but think about the butterfly effect of corporate decisions. A single choice to replace an experienced employee with a cheaper alternative had set in motion a chain of events that ultimately led to the destruction of an entire company. But there was no satisfaction in Meridian's downfall, only a reminder of how quickly things can change in the business world. The colleagues I'd worked with for 7 years were now scattered across different companies, their careers disrupted by decisions made in conference rooms by people who had never actually done the work. Today, Hayes Contract Solutions continues to grow and thrive. We now have offices in 3 cities and a team of 25 professionals. We've built the kind of company culture that values expertise over cost-cutting, relationships over transactions, and long-term thinking over quarterly profits. I still think about that Tuesday morning when I received the termination email, and I'm grateful for it. Not because of the revenge or the satisfaction of seeing my former employer fail, but because it taught me the most important lesson of my career. Your worth isn't determined by what someone else is willing to pay you, but by what you're willing to create for yourself. The $12 an hour temp who replaced me was never the real enemy. She was just another person trying to make a living in a system that values cost over competence. The real enemy was the mindset that treats experienced professionals as interchangeable parts, that believes expertise can be replaced with enthusiasm and good intentions. That mindset cost Meridian Financial Solutions $8 million in contracts. But it gave me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I never again have to sit in a windowless conference room while someone else decides my worth. Sometimes the best revenge is simply proving them wrong.